A baby left on a stranger's porch, her family murdered in cold blood, and a killer on the run through the backroads of Georgia. You are watching Dark Case Files. Subscribe for more real-world mysteries and chilling crimes you won't forget. It was the kind of small southern town where everybody waved and everyone thought they knew everyone else's business. The kind of place where porch lights glowed soft against weathered wood, and the hum of crickets filled the summer air. In the heart of Milford County, a modest single-story home sat at the edge of a gravel road, surrounded by open fields that rolled out like a patchwork quilt. Inside lived 21-year-old Marcus Hale, a quiet but determined young man who spent his mornings working construction and his evenings fixing up the old pickup he swore he'd have running by fall. His girlfriend, 19-year-old Alyssa Monroe, had the kind of smile that could light up a room and a stubborn streak that kept her fighting for a better life, even when the odds stacked high against her. Together they were raising their 7-month-old daughter, Grace, a tiny bundle of curiosity in a pastel pink onesie, always reaching for her mother's hair or giggling when Marcus blew raspberries against her cheek. They shared the house with Alyssa's mother, 40-year-old Caroline, and Alyssa's 15-year-old brother, Noah. Caroline worked nights at the diner off Highway 19, her hands calloused from years of double shifts, but her eyes still soft when she looked at her kids. Noah was in that restless space between boyhood and manhood, obsessed with dirt bikes, endlessly scrolling his phone, but fiercely loyal to his sister. They weren't rich, but they had each other, and that was enough. Or so they thought. The last week of July had been an oven in Milford County. Days creeping into the high 90s, the air so thick it clung to your skin. On the 29th, Alyssa posted a photo to her social media. Grace in her lap, Marcus leaning in from the side, both parents wearing sun-bleached smiles. No one could have guessed it would be the last picture taken of them alive. That evening, just after 9 p.m., in a quiet neighborhood 20 miles away, a porch light flicked on. Retired schoolteacher Evelyn Barnes had just settled into her recliner when a faint sound pulled her from her thoughts. Not a knock, but something softer. A whimper. When she opened her front door, her heart stopped. There, on the old wooden boards, sat a baby carrier. Inside, a sleeping infant, her face calm, cheeks flushed from the humid night. She was dressed in pink, wrapped in a thin blanket, no note, no explanation. Evelyn's hands trembled as she lifted the carrier inside. "Lord, help us," she whispered, dialing 911. As deputies arrived, the baby stirred, blinking up at the strangers with wide, dark eyes. She seemed unharmed, but in Milford County, the wheels of a far darker story were already in motion. Hours earlier, down a dirt road lined with whispering pines, a neighbor had heard what he thought were fireworks, short, sharp cracks splitting the stillness. He'd thought nothing of it at the time, but when Caroline didn't show up for a night shift and Noah failed to answer his phone, his stomach tightened. The following morning, the truth would come crashing in, for bodies discovered in the Hale Monroe home. Marcus, Alyssa, Caroline, and Noah all gone. Deputies secured the scene quickly, but even seasoned officers struggled to take it in. The house felt frozen in place. Half-finished dinners on the counter, a fan oscillating in the corner. In the back bedroom, sunlight leaked through blinds onto a scene no one wanted to describe. Shell casings scattered across the carpet. A cell phone vibrating on the floor with an incoming call no one could answer. The sheriff later told reporters it was one of the worst crime scenes he'd seen in his 30-year career. As investigators worked through the night, one thing became clear: this was not random. Whoever had done this had moved through the house with purpose. And for reasons no one could yet understand, they had spared Grace. The baby Evelyn found on her porch was the only living witness to the massacre. By sunrise, word spread like wildfire. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering names and theories. Was it a robbery gone wrong? Or something deeper, tied to the tangled relationships in this small town? The sheriff's office stayed tight-lipped, but by mid-morning, whispers of a suspect began to surface. A man with a history, someone who knew the family, and someone willing to kill. By mid-morning, the sheriff's office had locked the Hale Monroe home behind a wall of yellow tape. Deputies posted at every angle kept curious eyes away, while crime scene technicians moved slowly inside, photographing, dusting, and marking evidence with small numbered tents that stood like tiny gravestones across the rooms. Outside, the hum of a generator powering floodlights was the only sound, cutting through the still, heavy air. Reporters began to arrive, their vans lining the gravel shoulder, cameras aimed at the quiet house where the blinds now hung like closed eyelids. Inside the sheriff's command trailer, a team studied the first reports. The killings had been quick, execution style, with no signs of forced entry. Whoever did this was either trusted enough to be let in or knew how to get inside without alerting anyone. On the kitchen counter, detectives found a cup of coffee, still faintly warm, and a pack of cigarettes that didn't belong to anyone in the family. When the baby was confirmed to be Grace Hale, missing from the crime scene, the timeline began to take shape. The killer had left the house alive, carrying Grace, and driven her nearly 20 miles to Evelyn Barnes' home. The route was deliberate, avoiding main roads, ducking under streetlights where possible. Evelyn had no connection to the family, which meant the porch drop-off was either random or symbolic. Investigators began pulling phone records, scanning social media, and knocking on doors. A name surfaced again and again: Lucas Darnell. 28 years old, medium build, light brown skin, a face marked by the kind of hollow eyes you see in booking photos. Lucas wasn't a stranger to the law. He'd done time for armed robbery, served stretches in county for assault, and was currently out on bond for an incident in prison that left another inmate hospitalized. But what made his name stick wasn't just his record. It was his relationship. Lucas was dating Tara Monroe, Caroline's estranged oldest daughter and Alyssa's half-sister. The relationship between Tara and her family had been strained for years. Arguments about money, trust, and the kind of people she surrounded herself with. Some of those people were friends of Lucas, friends with reputations for violence. In the small, tangled web of Milford County connections, Lucas had been to the Hale Monroe house before. He knew its layout. He knew who slept where. The sheriff held a press briefing at noon, his voice steady but grim. "We have reason to believe this was a targeted attack," he told the crowd. "We are pursuing all leads. The public should be aware of a person of interest, 28-year-old Lucas Darnell. If you see him, do not approach. Call 911 immediately." Behind him, the mugshot appeared, Lucas in a black hoodie, staring straight through the camera. Almost instantly, the community's mood shifted from grief to unease. Parents kept kids indoors. Farmers carrying feed sacks to their barns watched the tree lines for movement. A manhunt was officially underway. That afternoon, deputies located Lucas's vehicle, a dark blue sedan, abandoned behind a shuttered gas station on the outskirts of Milford County. Inside were fast food wrappers, a half-empty water bottle, and an empty rifle case. There was no sign of Lucas himself. Blood was found on the driver's side door, but tests would take days. As daylight began to fade, search teams assembled. Units were deployed into the pine woods. The sound of barking and men's voices calling commands carried across the fields. A helicopter traced slow circles overhead, its spotlight combing the ground. In a sheriff's office, detectives pieced together a map of Lucas's possible movements. He'd grown up in the area, knew every back road, every deer trail, every place where you could disappear if you didn't want to be found. And with the baby safe, investigators worried that Lucas, now untethered by hostages, could be more desperate and more dangerous than ever. By nightfall, the county was on edge. Porch lights that normally stayed off in summer burned through the darkness. Guns were loaded, dogs chained close to the house. Lucas Darnell was somewhere out there, and no one knew what his next move might be. The next morning broke hot and hazy, the kind of Georgia summer dawn where the air feels heavy enough to drink. Mist clung low to the fields, curling around fence posts and tree stumps like pale smoke. By the time the sun broke over the pines, search crews were already in motion. Dozens of officers from Milford County, neighboring jurisdictions, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and even U.S. Marshals spread out in a widening ring from where Lucas's car had been found. The woods here were thick, a tangle of loblolly pine and undergrowth that could swallow a man whole in seconds. K-9 handlers, moved slowly, letting their dogs nose through the damp air. Now and then, a radio crackled with a possible lead. A boot print in the mud by a drainage ditch, a broken branch near the old rail bed, the sound of movement beyond the tree-line. Each report sent deputies rushing in, rifles raised, only to find silence. Witnesses began to call in, their stories overlapping in that messy way panic always makes them. A trucker swore he saw a man in a dark hoodie walking along Route 14 just after midnight, ducking into the woods when headlights approached. A woman hanging laundry behind her farmhouse reported the glint of metal between the trees looked like a rifle barrel before it vanished. A teenager claimed he saw Lucas slip into the back of an abandoned church on Larkspur Road. Though when deputies entered, they found only dust, a few beer cans, and a crumpled sleeping bag that smelled of sweat and mildew. By midday, the sheriff's office confirmed what many feared. Lucas was armed. The empty rifle case in his car wasn't just a bluff. Somewhere in those woods, he had a weapon and the kind of desperation that made him unpredictable. Helicopters circled low, their rotors chopping the humid air. From above, searchers could see how easy it would be for a man to vanish here. Gullies deep enough to hide in, kudzu climbing over rusted sheds, creeks running dark under tangles of brush. Every shadow seemed like it could move. The tension reached a breaking point that afternoon when a deputy on patrol spotted movement along the edge of a soybean field. Through binoculars, he saw a figure, medium build, dark hoodie, backpack slung low, moving with quick, jerky steps toward the tree line. The deputy called it in, and within minutes, half a dozen units converged. But when they reached the spot, the figure was gone, leaving only the faint smell of cigarette smoke and fresh boot prints heading deeper into the pines. The sheriff addressed the media at dusk, his face lined with exhaustion. "We believe Lucas Darnell is still in the area. He's dangerous, and he's desperate. We will not rest until he's in custody." His voice was steady, but behind his eyes was the awareness that every day Lucas stayed free increased the chances of another tragedy. That night, the search tightened. Teams with night vision gear swept the woods in overlapping arcs. Motion sensors were set up along deer trails. Unmarked cars cruised the back roads with their headlights off, looking for movement in the glow of their dash lights. At 2:17 a.m., a call came in from a construction worker driving home after a late shift. He'd seen a man sprint across the road just outside the lights of his truck, a man in a hoodie, panting, sweat glistening on his face even in the dark. The worker had caught the flash of something metallic in his hand. Within 15 minutes, the area was swarming with law enforcement. Officers fanned out, their flashlights cutting pale cones through the trees. Somewhere in that black, humid night, Lucas Darnell was running, hiding, maybe watching them from just a few yards away. But like smoke through open fingers, he slipped away again. For Milford County, the nightmare wasn't over. It was only tightening its grip. The dawn that broke over Milford County on August 2nd was pale and brittle, the sky the color of wet ash. After nearly 4 days of searching, the manhunt had taken on a rhythm. Sweeps at first light, interviews through the heat of day, night patrols under a curtain of insects and humidity. Every hour that passed without Lucas Darnell in custody was another hour of unease for the people who called these quiet backroads home. At T6:42 a.m., a call came into dispatch. A foreman at a construction site on the edge of Jackson Hollow reported seeing a man crouched low behind a portable restroom, head snapping up at the sound of approaching vehicles. The description was almost too perfect. Medium build, black hoodie damp with sweat, jeans dark with mud, eyes darting in every direction. The foreman swore he recognized him from the news. Units moved fast. 2 marked cruisers blocked the main road, while a pair of unmarked SUVs slipped around the back. The U.S. Marshals, grim-faced and focused, advanced on foot, rifles shouldered. Through the thin morning fog, the silhouette appeared, frozen in place for a heartbeat before bolting toward the parking lot. "Lucas, stop!" one marshal barked. The figure didn't slow. Tires screamed as a third vehicle cut across his path. Lucas skidded to a halt, spinning on his heel, hands twitching at his sides. For a split second, it seemed like he might make a final, fatal choice. Then, shoulders sagging, breath heaving in the damp air, he raised his hands. Officers moved in, pinning his wrists in steel, frisking him as he stared at the ground. His face was drawn, eyes hollow, skin streaked with grime. The arrest was over in less than a minute, but the sound of it, the muffled shouts, the snap of handcuffs, the radios crackling with confirmation, seemed to echo far longer. By the time Lucas was loaded into the back of a cruiser, the sheriff was already on the radio to his deputies. The manhunt was over. In the days that followed, the charges came in quick succession. 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, unlawful possession of a firearm. The district attorney made his stance clear. This would be a death penalty case. Lucas entered a not guilty plea at his first appearance, his voice flat, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the courtroom walls. For the Hale Monroe family, justice was only just beginning its slow, grinding path. Caroline, Marcus, Alyssa, and Noah were laid to rest in a shared service attended by nearly the entire town. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the grass, the heat of the day settling heavy on the mourner's shoulders. At the front, a single small blanket lay folded on the casket display, the one Grace had been wearing when Evelyn found her. Grace herself was there too, cradled in the arms of her aunt, too young to understand the storm that had passed over her life. She would grow up with stories, photographs, the memories others could give her of the family she lost. In time, maybe she'd learn the name of the man who took them away. Milford County slowly began to breathe again. The porch where Evelyn had found Grace now stood as a quiet reminder that sometimes, even in the darkest acts, a single flicker of mercy can remain. The sheriff called it the only light in a night full of shadows. But for those who lived it, the case of Lucas Darnell would never be just another headline. It was the night their small town learned how quickly the familiar can turn to fear and how far justice sometimes has to travel before it comes home. You've been watching Dark Case Files. Subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger and darker than fiction. Until next time, stay safe.